Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the first CCNP study session. Before I get right into it, just let me know if you can hear me by telling me where you're watching from. So which country are you in? Where are you watching from today? You might have noticed I have a new setup here with the mic. Let me get that out of my face here. All right, so where are you guys watching from? KSA, that's Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, is that correct? Awesome, glad to have you. You got USA, Canada, Korea, UK, Philippines, Kiev. I hope you're doing fine. I know there's that might be a dangerous place at the moment. I hope you're doing all right. Libya, Germany, Angola, Singapore, Pakistan, Azerbaijan, Peru, Morocco, Spain, India, Nebraska. That's USA. Awesome, people all over. Okay, so the CCNA course, let me talk about that briefly. That is finished. I will probably make some additional videos in the future, just to fill in some gaps and make it even better. But in its current state, it is complete. I've covered all the CCNA exam topics, and I think it's a really good course for the CCNA. I'm really proud of it. So that course is done, and now we're moving in a new direction. So I want to make a complete CCNP course in the future, but I want to be clear, this CCNP study session series isn't going to be a complete CCNP course, but rather I'm studying myself for the NCORE exam at the moment because my CCNP certification is going to expire soon, so I have to take the exam to renew it. So since I'm studying for the NCORE, I figured I'd convert some of my notes into some live streams, make some simple slides and flashcards, and you guys can use those to study along with me as I'm reviewing for my CCNP. Echo Slam says, am I watching Justin Timberlake? If only. I'm not that rich and handsome. Maybe someday. We got Gage Murphy says, Jeremy, I'm in the US. He's finishing a NetAcad course for CCNA, but he says, your videos were so much better than the Cisco instructors. Thank you. That's very kind of you. And I'm glad you liked the course. Nick, congrats on the CCNA pass. Hey, Hayer. See you're in Japan also. Awesome. All right, so yes, as I said, this series of streams is going to be... No sound. Did someone say no sound? You're kidding me, right? Okay, no, I just checked. Mic should be good. All right, so this series of CCNP streams, just to repeat, is going to be me going over my study notes. I make some slides, make some flashcards, and then we study them together. So let's get right into it. Let me move my windows around a bit. All right, so first, let's look at the CCNP NCORE exam topics. There we go. So I'd say the NCORE exam, and if you're not aware, to get the CCNP Enterprise infrastructure, the CCNP Enterprise certification, which is sort of the natural next step after the CCNA. Of course, there are other kinds of CCNPs like security, collaboration, data center like that, but those are typically more advanced. And the natural first step or next step after the CCNA is the CCNP Enterprise. So to get that, you have to take 2 exams. One is the N-Core, or a lot of people call it the Encore exam. It's the Enterprise Core. And then you can take 1 specialization exam. But you do have to take the Core, and that's what we're focusing on for now. Now, the N-Core exam is actually quite similar to the CCNA, I'd say, in that it's very broad. It covers a lot of different topics, and honestly, basically the same topics you cover in the CCNA, but you do go quite a bit deeper. It is a professional level exam, and yeah, they really expect you to know your stuff because it is a professional level, not an associate level exam. All right, we have a question. How are you revising for the 350-401? That is the N-Core exam. This is the code here, 350-401. So how am I revising? Well, I'm basically just going through these exam topics one by one and making sure I know them. So these are all things I've studied in the past. I'm just reviewing. But for example, I have the official cert guide. I think it's good to have a set of books to study for. So I have the official cert guide by Cisco Press. I do Google searches. There's lots of great Cisco documentation, also resources on other blogs. You can search on YouTube. There are, of course, lots of great YouTubers making CCNP level content. And for example, here is some Cisco documentation that I'm using as the main resource for today's stream. So this is the VLAN configuration guide for Cisco Catalyst 9500 switches. And here is a chapter covering VTP. So this is really everything you need to know about VTP. All in one convenient document here. It's available for free online, so I highly recommend checking it out. And I did put a link in the description. So we will be referring to this document throughout today's stream. But I do highly recommend checking it out yourself. All right, so let's go back to these exam topics. Today, we are looking at 3.0 infrastructure. Oh, nice, Andrew. $10 donation. Thanks so much, Andrew. That's awesome. I appreciate the support. Hope you can stick around for the stream. All right, we got someone said, there's not a lot on YouTube for CCNP. Yeah, I guess there isn't. There is quite a lot for CCNA, including my course. But you are right that there is less CCNP level content. I hope to change that. As you know from my CCNA course, it does take me a long time to make my videos. You know, I prepare all the slides. Everything is 100% scripted. So I'm not just talking. I script everything out. I record it. And it takes a long time. So, you know, my CCNP complete course, it's going to take at least a few years to finish that. But let's get some nice CCNP level content on YouTube. Anyway, so today's topic is here. Under Layer 2, 3.1a, troubleshoot static and dynamic 802.1q trunking protocols. So this includes simple things like just configuring trunks and access ports, as well as DTP, Dynamic Trunking Protocol, and today's main topic, VTP, VLAN Trunking Protocol. So all of those things are included in this one subtopic here, 3.1a. That's what we're covering. I got a question from H. Zakaria. Will CCNP be delivered in about 60 videos, same as CCNA? I really have no idea. Yeah, I haven't even started making the course yet, so I can't say how long it will be yet. Anyway, so that is the introduction. We are going to be covering CCNP Encore, and in today's stream, in specific, we're covering part of this subtopic here, 3.1a, troubleshoot static and dynamic 802.1q trunking protocols. So let's open up the slides. Oh, there's a little preview there. Oh, okay, so 1 second. You can only see part of it. There we go, that's better. Okay, so CCNP Encore session number 1, VLAN Trunking Protocol, VTP. Let's get right into it. So here's what we're going to cover in the stream. First is a VTP review. So we did cover VTP in my CCNA course, It's not actually listed in the CCNA exam topics, but I did include it just in case you might be asked some things about it on the exam. And if you're curious what day it is, I wrote that down here. That is day 19. So in day 19 of my CCNA course, I gave you a quick introduction to VTP. So you should know the basics already if you've seen that video in my course. Okay, so we'll review VTP just so we can get up to speed. And then we'll cover the different VTP versions. There are 3, version 1, 2, and 3. The different modes like VTP server, VTP client, and then VTP messages. So what kind of advertisements are being sent? VTP pruning is a new topic I didn't cover in the CCNA video. And then we'll see how to configure VTP and also verify with different show commands. All right, let me just check the chat quickly here before we get into it. Oh, Diego, thanks for the donation, $9.99. Thanks for the $10, I appreciate it. Whoa, Gage Murphy, $49.99, $50, awesome. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the support, guys. It's good to be back. I know it's been a while since I posted a video. But yeah, hopefully we'll get back to regular posting. I'm planning to do a lot of live streams like this, these CCNP study sessions. And then once I'm done reviewing for my CCNP, we'll get into a full CCNP Encore course. And then even more after that in the future. How many people do we have now? Oh, 100, awesome. Great, thanks for joining, everyone. I know that this might not be a good time for all of you to join live. So for some of you, it might be in the middle of the night. And if it is, thank you so much for staying up to watch. But you can go to sleep, it's okay. This will be available after the live stream, of course. But I will try to stream at different times. Not always this time. Now it's Saturday morning. It's a convenient time for me, but I will do some others, maybe like Friday night streams, my time. I'm in Japan, by the way. Or like Saturday night. Just so different people can join live at different times. All right, anyways, let's get into the lesson itself. We'll do some more chatting later. So first, a review of VTP, just so we can all get up to speed on what VTP, the VLAN trunking protocol, is. So VTP is a Cisco proprietary protocol, so it only works on Cisco switches. Now there are other standards that other makers use, but VTP itself only works on Cisco switches. And it allows switches to maintain VLAN configuration consistency across a LAN. So if you configure a VLAN on one switch, it can automatically send an advertisement to other switches, and they will configure that VLAN automatically themselves. So VLANs configured on VTP servers are advertised throughout the network. So if you've watched my CCNA Day 19 video, you know that there are VTP servers and VTP clients. You can't configure VLANs on clients, but rather you configure the VLANs on servers, and then servers send advertisements to the clients. Oh, and that's written right here. VTP clients can't create VLANs, they only sync to VTP servers. And VTP-enabled switches will sync to the VTP advertisement with the highest revision number. So every time you make a change to the VLAN database, the VLAN server will send an advertisement with an increased revision number. This is how they keep track of the newest version of the VLAN database. So let's look at that actually. I have a lab here in Cisco CML. This is Cisco Modeling Labs. For my CCNP course, we're not going to be using Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer is a great tool. I really like it for the CCNA. It's free. It lets you do basically everything you need to do for the CCNA. And it's a really great tool. But it is limited. And really, at the CCNP level and beyond, you have to move beyond Packet Tracer. Now, CML, unfortunately, is not free. You have to pay Cisco to use it. My license is, I think, $200 a year. But really, it's worth it. If you're serious about your studies, I highly recommend it. And it lets you run real Cisco iOS. So these here, I have 3 virtual switches, but they're running actual Cisco iOS. This is not like Packet Tracer, like simulating iOS. This is real Cisco iOS, real virtual switches. So Here I'm in switch 1's console, the CLI. The only configuration I've done here on each of these switches is configure the host name. So I will enable here, show VTP status. Now this is the main VTP show command that you should know, show VTP status. Actually, let me increase the font size of the CLI. Oh, I can't actually, 20 is the max. All right, so I hope that's big enough for you to see. So let's check out the VTP status here. Okay. Oh, actually, it does have a domain name configured. So I configured this switch before as I was getting prepared. So it already has a domain name. The version is 3. Okay, I should delete those configurations. You know what? Let's make some new switches so I can show you right from the beginning. I thought I cleared the configuration, but it seems I didn't. So I will stop the simulation. Now, I used to use a tool called GNS3. GNS3 is still very popular, and it's not Cisco official, but it lets you take Cisco images, iOS files, and run them in GNS3. But now, according to Cisco's end user license agreement, you're not allowed to do that. So the only legal way to use these images is to run them in CML. So that's what I'm doing. But I'm still new to CML, so I'm not totally sure how it works. How can I clear these? Erase them? Can I just wipe them? Will that do it? Let's try. Stop the nodes. Any experienced CML users here? It does seem less responsive to me than GNS3. Oh yeah, that's true. You can use the DevNet sandbox. So Cisco DevNet does have a sandbox available where you can run not GNS3, where you can run CML for free. But try to avoid using that too much, because it is available for free, but there are limited resources there. So you should really only use it if you are testing out DevNet tools and things like that. Don't use it just as like your free personal lab. These are not stopping. Okay, I'm not sure what's happening here, but it is not responding to my request to wipe the nodes. Dan says, screen looks blurry. What quality are you watching in? See if you can turn it up to like 720 or 1080p like that. Okay, I'm going to close this window and try to open CML again. I got to say, for doing these live streams, I really should get a better computer. I can hear my fan working pretty hard, running CML and live streaming at the same time. Okay, CML is going slow. Let's return to the slides, and we'll get back to that later. I wanted to demonstrate the revision number thing here, but we'll look at that later. So this number, the revision number, is used to keep track of the current version of the VLAN database. So every switch has a VLAN database where it saves VLAN information, and VTP lets you basically sync that database all across the network, and that's why it's convenient. And each time a change is made, the revision number is incremented by 1. Now, due to potential risks associated with VTP version 1 and version 2, VTP is often disabled in networks. Modern networks don't really use VTP often. Now, VTP version 3, does fix these issues, but still VTP isn't that popular. Now, the main risk is if you accidentally connect a switch to the network that has a higher revision number, here, the highest revision number, or higher than the current revision number, those switches will sync their VLAN database to that switch automatically. And that could be disastrous because then your switches could suddenly erase all the VLANs they need, and then the whole network goes down. So that is a risk with VTP version 1 and version 2, but version 3 does fix these issues. But still, to be honest, VTP isn't that popular in modern networks. So let's go into the different VTP versions. There are 3 of them. First is version 1. This is the default version on switches. Maybe not all switches, but all the ones I've used. Version 1 is the default version when you first boot up the switch. And then there's VTP version 2, which is very similar to version 1, to be honest. Not a lot of changes. One thing is that it added support for token ring VLANs. Now, you don't have to know about token ring. It's an old layer 2 protocol that is no longer used. These days, we always use Ethernet. But maybe you should just know that as a bit of trivia. VTP version 2 added support for token ring VLANs. But you definitely don't have to know about token ring itself. And then there is VTP version 3, which actually did add a lot of new stuff and is a big improvement over version 1 and version 2. So version 3 added enhanced authentication. So as we'll see in the configuration section, VTP version 1 and 2, you can configure a password, but it's only plain text. You can only configure a plain text password, and that's just not secure, having a password there in plain text to see. So you can configure a hidden or a secret password, and we'll look at that more later as we look at the configuration. It added support for extended range VLANs, 1006 to 4094. So VTP version 1 and 2 can actually only use the standard range VLANs, 1 to 1005. So you won't be able to configure any VLANs in this range, and they won't be advertised over the network. So that is a big improvement for VTP version 3 in networks that need more VLANs. They added support for private VLANs. Now, private VLANs are something we don't cover in the CCNA, and I'm not sure if they're in the CCNP Encore. Let me see the exam topics. I don't think there are private VLANs. Would they be in security? Probably not. No. Yeah, so you don't even have to know private VLANs for the Encore. So don't worry about that one too much now. Now here's a major difference. There are VTP primary and secondary servers. So only the primary server, there is one primary server, and only that switch can create, modify, or delete VLANs. By default, all VTP version 3 switches are secondary servers, so you can't actually create VLANs on VTP servers by default in VTP version 3. You have to go to one switch and say, you are the primary server, and then that switch will be the only one that can actually make changes to the VLAN database. All right, now VTP version 3 can also propagate MST, multiple spanning tree information. Now, I did briefly introduce MST in the CCNA course. We didn't actually go into any details at all, but that is definitely something you have to know for the CCNP, and I will cover that in a stream, maybe in the near future, multiple spanning tree. VTP off mode is a new feature of VTP version 3. So in VTP version 1 and 2, you couldn't actually disable VTP. There's no way to turn it off. Now, instead, we basically just configured all switches as VTP transparent, and then in that way, they don't actually send and receive VTP advertisements. So it's in effect like disabling VTP, but there was no actual VTP off mode. VTP version 3 gives you that option to tell the switch, don't run VTP, don't participate at all. So they won't send or receive advertisements or forward them to other switches like that. Okay, so that is the summary of the VTP versions. Now let's get back to CML, so I can log in again. Okay, that is not good. Let's see if that works. You know, when you're doing a live stream, there's always going to be some kind of problem. Okay, so this is not working. Let me close CML, and I'm just going to restart the virtual machine. As you can see here, I'm using, this is VMware Workstation Pro. So I run the CML virtual machine in here. So I just shut it down, wait for it to turn off. And let's check the chat in the meantime. Oh, here's a question. What is commonly used instead of VTP? Manual configuration? Yeah, basically. So you just manually configure the VLANs or use some other automation tool to configure VLANs on the switches. For example, you could do that in Cisco DNA Center, for example, or use a Python script. Yeah, so either manual configuration or some other automation tool, depending on the size of the network. Oh, question. Can you please explain more about VTP primary and secondary server? Yes, I will, definitely. When we get to the configurations, I will cover that more. All right, so I'm still waiting for the CML virtual machine to shut down and then restart. So let's get back to the slides then. So those are the VTP versions, VTP 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 are basically the same. 3 is quite a bit different, and this is the version you should definitely use. If you are running VTP in your network, definitely you want to run VTP version 3. Now, in terms of interoperability, so for example, can a VTP version 1 and version 2 switch talk to each other and interoperate? No, they can't. So VTP version 1 can't interoperate with version 2 or version 3. So if you're running VTP version 1 on one switch and VTP version 2 on the other, they can't communicate. Or version 1 on one switch and version 3 on the other, they can't communicate. So version 1 is not interoperable with the other versions. Now, VTP version 2 and version 3 actually can interoperate. So if you have one switch that can't run VTP version 3, maybe it's quite old, and it's connected to a switch running version 3, they actually can interoperate. Now, how that works is that the VTP version 3 switch will send version 2 messages to the version 2 switch. So it will downgrade its level just for that connection. So these two, yes, you can interoperate version 2 and version 3. Okay, so let's go to the next part, which is VTP modes. So first, version 1 and version 2. Because version 3 has a couple differences. So there are 3 operational modes for VTP version 1 and version 2. First is server. So this is the default mode for a VTP-enabled switch. When the switch first boots up, it will be running as a VTP server. Now VTP itself is also enabled by default. So it will be a VTP server by default. And VTP servers can create, modify, and delete VLANs. And they will send a VTP advertisement out of its trunk ports when a change is made. Now, this is important. Out of its trunk ports. VTP only operates over trunk ports, not access ports. So if 2 switches running VTP are connected with an access link, they will not send VTP messages to each other. They will not communicate using VTP. So VTP only operates on trunk ports. Remember, it's the VLAN trunking protocol. So VTP does not operate over access ports. Okay, and a server will sync its VLAN database if it receives a VTP advertisement with a higher revision number. So really, VTP servers also operate as clients. They don't only send advertisements, they also receive advertisements and then update their database if needed. So really, a VTP server is like a server plus client. Okay, next point. They will forward received advertisements out of their trunk ports. So yeah, they also forward advertisements. So if they receive a VTP advertisement with a higher revision number, they will also send it to their connected neighbors. Now, VTP clients, they cannot create, modify, or delete VLANs. So if you try to configure a VLAN on a VTP client, the command will be rejected and the VLAN will not be configured. And a VTP client will sync its VLAN database, just like a server, if it receives a VTP advertisement with a higher revision number. It will forward received advertisements, and that is a VTP client. So it's like a server, but you can't configure any VLANs on it. All right, and then transparent mode is a little different. So a transparent switch can create, modify, and delete VLANs. You can make VLAN configurations on a transparent switch, but it will not send advertisements with information about its VLAN database to neighbors. So it doesn't participate in the VTP domain, basically. It has its own VLAN database separate from the other switches in the domain. And there we go. It will not sync its VLAN database. If it does receive a VTP advertisement, it will forward that advertisement to its neighbors, to its connected neighbors over trunk ports. But it will not send its own advertisements when you configure VLANs, and it will not update its VLAN database when it receives VTP advertisements. So those are the three modes of VTP version 1 and version 2. Now, before going on to the next slide, my virtual machine, CML virtual machine, has powered off, so I will power it on again, and let's hope we can get CML working for this stream. Okay, so we'll wait for that to boot up and move on to VTP modes for version 3. So VTP version 3 also has server, client, and transparent mode switches. However, it adds a new mode, which is off. So off disables VTP on the switch. So it will not send or respond to VTP messages, basically. And it will not forward VTP messages. And in addition, here's another big difference, which I mentioned before. One switch functions as the primary server, and other VTP servers are secondary servers. So what does that mean? Only the primary server can create, modify, or delete VLANs. And that is only one switch in the domain. That is the VTP primary server. So what do secondary servers do? Well, basically, they are VTP clients. There's no difference. The only difference is that they are capable of becoming the VTP primary server. The only way to do that is by configuring them VTP primary. That is the command. So really, I think the VTP secondary server mode is a bit redundant because it functions exactly like a VTP client, to be honest. So yeah, definitely remember that. The primary server is the only one that can create, modify, and delete VLANs. Secondary servers just operate like another VTP client, really. Oh, I have a question here. Sorry, I missed some other questions. I'll get back to them later. Can I learn CCNP without knowledge of CCNA? I don't recommend it. You really should study a CCNA course and ideally get the CCNA certification before trying the CCNP. Okay, VTP Messages. Now, before going on to that, it looks like my CML virtual machine has booted up. So let's see if I can access CML. There we go. Let's see if the login works. And it's not working, so it looks like there is some error with CML2. So I won't actually be able to go into the CLI and do configurations here, which is unfortunate. But we can still just go through the slides and do a quick quiz. I'm not sure what the issue is there. Anyway, looks like I broke my CML virtual machine, so I'll have to fix that later off stream. Okay, so let's look at the different VTP message types. So there are 4 VTP message types. First is summary advertisement. So these are sent by all VTP servers once every 5 minutes. So there is a timer. Every 5 minutes, they'll send a VTP advertisement. And notably, this doesn't include information about VLANs. So this message type only includes information like the version, the domain name, the revision number, etc. And actually, I found a good resource. VTP message types. Search into Google here. If you want to learn more about the different message types, here, in-depth analysis of VTP from firewall.cx. So just Google VTP message types, and you can find it here. And he has a pretty good summary of the different message types. So here is a summary advertisement of VTP. It gives information like what version of VTP is running, what is the message type that I'm sending now, VTP followers, the domain information like the domain name, configuration revision number, etc. But this message doesn't actually include information about the VLAN database itself. However, the next type, VTP subset advertisement, does. So when a VLAN configuration is made on a server, it will send first a summary advertisement and then a subset advertisement message. And this message is similar to summary advertisement, but also includes VLAN information. So let's go back to that firewall.cx page here. Here is the format of a subset advertisement message. And here we go. VLAN info field. So this does include information about the VLANs. And this is what clients use to update their VLAN database. Okay, now, summary advertisements and subset advertisements are sent by VTP servers. Now, the advertisement request is used by VTP clients to request an advertisement from a server. And note I put in brackets here and servers because, as I said before, servers do also operate like clients in that they will update their VLAN database if they get a message with a higher revision number. So for example, when a client boots up, or when it receives a summary advertisement with a higher revision number than its own, it will say, hey, can you please send me a subset advertisement? I need to update my VLAN database, so please send me an advertisement. And then there is another kind of message called a join. It's similar to an advertisement request, and it's sent when the client first joins the VTP domain. And there is information on this page also about here, advertisement requests. This is the format of the message, and a little bit about the VTP join messages. So let me pause here for a second to say that Google is really an amazing tool because there are tons of websites and blogs like this, firewall.cx, with really great articles about basically all of the topics on the CCNP NCORE exam. And as you progress beyond CCNA, you have to be a much more independent learner. So you can't expect one book or one course to give you everything you need to pass the exam. You have to be much more independent and spend time searching, do Google searches, and find other resources and study them. So you have to be much more independent in that way at the CCNP level, and especially at the CCIE level, definitely. You're not going to find one single course that teaches you everything you need to know to pass the CCIE. That course doesn't exist. All right, so let's get back to the slides. Next is VTP pruning. This is a new topic for the CCNP. I mean that because I didn't cover it in my CCNA videos. And what VTP pruning does is that it automatically removes VLANs from trunk links where they are not necessary. So this reduces the amount of flooded traffic, broadcast or unknown unicast traffic in the network. So let's see how that works with a diagram from Cisco. So this is a network with VTP pruning turned off. There is no VTP pruning. So notice these two PCs here. These ones are in the red VLAN. Now I don't know why they gave it a color instead of a number, but okay, so this is the red VLAN. So switch D has a PC in the red VLAN, and switch A also has a PC in the red VLAN. But notice that switch C and switch F and switch E, well also switch B, they don't have any hosts in the red VLAN. However, if this PC here, connected to switch A, sends a broadcast message, it will go here to this PC, also in the red VLAN, but will also go to these switches. It will go to switch E, switch F, and switch C, even though they don't have any hosts in the red VLAN connected. So that's basically just wasted traffic. It's clogging up the network, and it's not necessary. So what VTP pruning does is it automatically prunes VLANs from ports where it's not necessary. So VTP will do these calculations for you. You don't have to do it manually. But basically, these switches will talk to each other. They'll send advertisements, pruning requests, and they will say, hey, I don't have any hosts in this VLAN connected to me. I don't need this VLAN. So it will be removed. The red VLAN will be removed from this port and from this port. So this time, when the PC sends a broadcast message, it will only go where it needs to go. It won't go unnecessarily to switch E, switch F, and switch C. So this sort of helps clean up the network and reduce the amount of unnecessary broadcast traffic. All right, so that is VTP pruning. And these images are from this Cisco documentation here that I showed you earlier. So I want to repeat that when you're studying for your CCNP, you have to be more independent and look for resources yourself. And Cisco documentation is definitely something you should be reading. So if you're studying for your NCORE, definitely check out this VLAN configuration guide. I put a link in the video description. So you can see they have a section here about VTP pruning. And here are those diagrams that I showed you in the slides. And note that they have information here about the different versions as well, the different advertisements. One sec. Sorry, bit of a cough there. Okay. So yeah, definitely check out this documentation. Now let's return to the slides. And let's look at some VTP configuration. Now, unfortunately, since my CML isn't working, I'm not going to be able to show you these actually in the CLI. So I recommend that you find some way to lab these yourself. Get CML or even GNS3 or EVNG, some other labbing software like that, or get some real hardware and try these out yourself. So since I can't show you these live, this will just be a summary of important VTP commands you should know. So here we go. First, to configure the VTP domain, the command is, you should know this from your CCNA studies, VTP domain name. So that is how you configure the domain name on a VTP switch. Configure the VTP mode. That's pretty simple. VTP mode client server transparent off. And note that this last one, off, is only available in version 3. So if you are running VTP version 1 or version 2, VTP mode off won't be available. Okay, next. Configure the VTP password. The command is, in VTP version 1 and 2, you only have this here. VTP password. In VTP version 3, you have these two options here, hidden and secret. And you really should know the difference between these two. I wanted to show you these in the CLI, but unfortunately I can't. So let's just read Cisco's explanation here. I will go to the how to configure VTP section here. Configuring a VTP version 3 password. Here is the guide. So here is the difference. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see this. Oh, actually, that's just harder to see. Let me zoom back out. Here we go. So hidden. This saves the secret key generated from the password string in the file. So what that means is you configure a plain text password. So for example, let me just show in a textpad here. I'll use the command VTP password Jeremy hidden, like that. This will take this plain text password. Jeremy is a plain text. It's not encrypted. It's not a hash. And it will convert it to a hash. So for example, a hash will look like just a random series of numbers and letters like that. So this is much more secure because instead of saving the password like this in plain text, it converts it to a hash. And if you're wondering what a hash is, a hash basically means it's one-way encryption. So it's like encryption where you change the text so it can't be read, but it's one way. So you're not supposed to be able to convert it back. Okay, so that is hidden. Now, what does the command VTP password secret do? VTP password secret, what you would do is enter the hash here. So VTP password, the hash, and then secret. So it lets you configure a hashed password. So you take a password that is already hashed and configure it on the switch. Directly configures the password. That's a little hard to explain without showing you directly in the CLI. So I highly recommend labbing this part here. Try labbing VTP password hidden and secret and see how they work differently. Okay, let's get back to the slides. Configure the VTP version. That's pretty simple. VTP version 1, 2, or 3. Now configure the VTP version 3 primary server, because as I said before, in VTP version 3, by default, servers are secondary servers, so they can't actually configure VLANs. So to configure the one primary server, the command is VTP primary. Now there's one key thing to notice here. This is not done in global configuration mode. This is done in privileged exec mode. Notice these commands here are all in global config mode, but here there is no config. So this is done in privileged exec mode, VTP primary. And now what are these options? So, as I said before, VTP version 3 can propagate not just VLAN information, but also MST, multiple spanning tree information. So if you use just this command, VTP primary, this applies only to VLANs. Now you can also specify VLAN here, but that's the same as the default VTP primary command. If you want the switch to be the primary server and tell other switches about MST, multiple spanning tree information, use the command VTP primary MST. And we will cover MST in another stream coming up soon, by the way. Okay, and then the option here, force. As I said before, there can only be one VTP primary server. So if you use the command VTP primary, but there's already another server, it will tell you, hey, there's another primary server. Now you can use this option force, and that will make this switch take over. So it will tell the current primary server, you're not the primary anymore, I'm the new primary, and this switch will become the new VTP version 3 primary server. All right, and enable VTP pruning. The command is simple, VTP pruning. This is disabled by default. So you can enable it with this command VTP pruning, and that's all you have to do. When you do that, the switch will automatically communicate with other switches, and they will do what's needed to remove these VLANs from different ports, as shown in these diagrams. All right, I believe there is one more thing here. Yes, enable or disable VTP on a port. So VTP is enabled by default on the switch and all trunk ports, but you can tell a switch, hey, don't send VTP or receive VTP advertisements on this port. And the command is VTP or no VTP. So as I said, it's enabled by default, so the command VTP on an interface will enable it on the interface, but that's not necessary since it's enabled by default. But you can disable it with the command no VTP on the port. Okay, and then VTP verification. Now again, unfortunately, I won't be able to show you these commands in the CLI. I'll have to fix my CML off stream. But you should just know these commands and try them out in your lab for the CCNP NCORE exam. So there's the command show VTP counters. This basically just shows like how many VTP messages have been sent and received, and simple counter information like that. Honestly, it's not that useful of a command, but you should be aware of it and know that it exists. And in VTP version 3, you can use this command to show VTP devices in the domain. So this command is not available for version 1 and version 2, but this will show which switches are in the VTP domain. And the conflict option shows information about conflicting primary servers. So if there are multiple switches saying I'm the primary server, this will give you information about that. You can use show VTP interface to show the status of interfaces in the VTP domain. So basically, it will just show you, is VTP enabled on this interface or is it not enabled on the interface? And by default, it is enabled on all interfaces. Okay, display the VTP password. So you can use the command show VTP password, and it will show you the VTP password on the switch. And then the last one, and by far the most useful one, is show VTP status. So if you're configuring and troubleshooting VTP, this is the main one you're going to use, show VTP status. It is definitely the most useful one there. Okay, so unfortunately, I was not able to show you everything in the lab. Yeah, I do have some recommendations here about fixing it, but I cannot do those at the moment. Yeah, I'll have to try to fix this, restore it off stream. And then in the next stream, we'll be able to look at some stuff in the lab. So let's get right into a quiz then. Unfortunately, since I didn't show you all this in the lab, it might be hard to recall some of this information. But let's get right into the quiz before wrapping up the stream. So, which of the following VTP modes allow you to create, modify, and delete VLANs? Select all that apply. So, put your answers in the chat. What do you think? I'll wait a minute and also check some questions in the chat while we're waiting. So put your answers, A, B, C, D, E, F. Which ones can create, modify, and delete VLANs? Okay, here's one question about VTP. In which situation do we use VTP mode transparent? Maybe we could use client mode instead, as long as they're in the same domain, no? Well, the purpose of VTP transparent is, well, one way it's commonly used is simply to disable VTP on the switch. If you don't want the switch using VTP, you can use VTP mode transparent and it won't participate. Now, of course, with VTP version 3, you can use VTP mode off instead, and that's even better. But basically, you use VTP transparent if you don't want the switch to participate in VTP at all. If it is a VTP client, that means it will sync its VLAN database to the other switches. If you want the switch to have a different VLAN database than the others, you configure it as a transparent. Now note that it will still pass on advertisements to others. So if it receives a VTP advertisement, it will send that advertisement to other switches. It just won't update its own VLAN database. So it lets the switch maintain its own unique VLAN database if that is necessary. All right, so we're getting a lot of answers here. Yeah, I see some correct answers. All right, so I'll go through these. So which one of these can? So VTP mode off, A. Can a VTP mode off switch create, modify, and delete VLANs? Yes, it can. So it won't participate in VTP. It won't participate in the VTP domain. It won't send, receive, forward VTP advertisements, but it will still be able to configure its own VLANs. It will have its own unique VLAN database, and it will still use VLANs like any other switch. It just won't use VTP. So A is correct. That is one of the correct options. A VTP mode off switch can create, modify, and delete VLANs. Now, how about B, mode transparent? Yes, a VTP mode transparent switch can create, modify, and delete VLANs. But similar to off, this will be its own unique VLAN database. It won't share its VLAN database with other switches. Now, the main difference between off and transparent is that a transparent switch will still forward advertisements to others. So if it receives a VTP advertisement, it won't update its VLAN database, but it will send that advertisement on to its other connected neighbors. All right, client, no. Clients cannot create, modify, or delete VLANs. They will sync their VLAN database to the highest revision number in the domain, but they will not, you cannot go in the CLI of a VTP client and create or delete VLANs. Now a server, yes. Now notice I have server, secondary server, primary server. So these two options here are referring to VTP version 3. D here, server, this is referring to VTP version 1 and version 2. So in version 1 and version 2, a server, yes, it can create, modify, and delete VLANs. Now, how about a secondary server in VTP version 3? The answer is no, it cannot create, modify, or delete VLANs. In VTP version 3, by default, all switches are secondary servers. They cannot create, modify, or delete VLANs. So you have to configure one switch as the primary server, and only this switch can create, modify, or delete VLANs. Okay, so the answer is A, B, D, and F. How many of you got that correct? Let's see. Oh, nice. Gage Murphy, A, B, D, F. I see a lot of, DF, DF, BDF, BDF. So a lot of you are getting close, but I can see how you might forget off here. But yes, an off switch can create, modify, and delete VLANs. So that is a bit tricky there, A. But yeah, the correct answer is A, B, D, F. Okay, I got 2 more questions. Next one. Which of the following are not true if the following configurations are made on switch 1? All right, so this might take some more time to read the question. Let's walk through it together. So you make these configurations on switch 1. VTP mode transparent, VTP version 2, VTP domain, Jeremy's IT lab. So, I think 2 of these options, I didn't say select 2, I should have written here, select 2. 2 of these are not correct statements. So, I'll read through them. A, switch 1 can create, modify, or delete VLANs. So, can switch 1 do that? Look at these configurations and think about that. B, switch 1 will update its VLAN database if it receives an advertisement with a higher revision number from any domain. Or C, switch 1 will update its VLAN database if it receives an advertisement with a higher revision number from the Jeremy's IT lab domain, because that is the domain configured here. Or D, switch 1 will interoperate with a VTP version 3 switch. So select 2 choices. 2 of these are not true, incorrect. Okay? So don't select the 2 correct choices. Select the 2 not true, the 2 incorrect choices. All right, so I'll give you a minute to think about that and write your answer in the chat. I see A and C, A and C, B and C, B and C, A and D, C, D. Okay, we're getting a lot of different answers. I really should get that. What's that software that Keith Barker uses? Kahoot? That would be fun to do some quizzes with, but for now, we'll do this. Write your answers in the chat, old school style. Okay. Okay, so let's check. Let me erase my writing here. So, again, which of the following are not true? Now, this is maybe a confusing way to write a question, but you could find something like this on an exam, so it's very important you read the question carefully. Don't select the 2 correct choices, select the 2 incorrect choices. Okay, so switch 1, can it create, modify, or delete VLANs? Well, it is VTP mode transparent. So yes, it can. It will not update its VLAN database, but it can create, modify, or delete VLANs. Now, B and C, both of these involve updating the VLAN database. And I just gave away the answer there when I said it cannot update its VLAN database. So a VTP mode transparent switch will maintain its own unique VLAN database. It will not sync to the VLAN database of other switches in the VTP domain. So B and C are both incorrect. Oh, okay, so see, I'm confusing myself here. Wait. So A, this statement is true. It is true. So actually this is a incorrect choice. So A is not a correct choice because it is true. And we want to select the 2 that are not true. Okay, so I'm confusing myself here. All right, B and C, These both say switch 1 will update its VLAN database. Switch 1 will update its VLAN database. But a VTP mode transparent switch does not update its VLAN database. So these two are the correct choices because they are not true. Okay, they are not true, so they are correct choices. All right. And then D, switch 1 will interoperate with a VTP version 3 switch. Yes, this is true. So that means it is an incorrect choice because it is true. As I said earlier in the stream, a VTP version 3 switch, if it's connected to a VTP version 2 switch, the version 3 switch will send messages using a VTP version 2 format. So that means this VTP version 2 switch here, switch 1, will understand those messages and they can interoperate. Now note that because it is mode transparent, it will not update its VLAN database when it receives the message from the version 3 switch, but it will pass on those messages to other switches. So yes, VTP version 2 and version 3. Okay, yes. But for example, version 1 switch and a version 3 switch cannot interoperate. And a version 1 and a version 2 switch cannot interoperate. Okay, so only version 2 and version 3 switches can interoperate together. So, as I said again, that wording is a little confusing, but A and D are true, so they are incorrect choices. B and C are not true, so they are the correct choices for this quiz. So there's a lesson for the exam there. Make sure you read the question clearly. Okay, and one more quiz for today. Which of the following statements about switch 1's gigabit Ethernet 01 interface are true? Select 2. So again, I really wanted to show you this stuff in CML, but I broke my CML. But I did mention this in the lecture. So here are the configurations I made on G01. First, I use the VTP command. This enables VTP on the interface. Now, it's enabled by default, so it doesn't matter, but I included the command here. Then switch port mode access, switch port trunk, allowed VLAN all, switch port trunk encapsulation.1q. So this is testing your knowledge of how these interface configurations actually work. So select 2. Which of these statements are true? A, G01 will send and receive VTP advertisements. B, G01 is an access port. C, G01 is a trunk port. D, G01 won't send and receive VTP advertisements. Okay, select 2 correct choices. All right, put your answers in the chat. 2 of these are true. Got some B, A and C, B and D, A and B. Okay, so let's look at the answer. So the key here is, I said that only trunk ports send and receive VTP advertisements. So access ports do not. Even if VTP itself is enabled, it will not be active on an access port. So the real key here is G01 an access port or is it a trunk port? That is the key here. So I first configured switch port mode access, but then I configured switch port trunk allowed VLAN all, switch port trunk encapsulation.1q. So how does this work? Is this an access port or a trunk port? The answer is, it is an access port. It's an access port. I configured switch port mode access. I never configured switch port mode trunk, so this is not a trunk port. It is an access port. Now I configured some trunk settings. So if I configured switch port mode trunk, it would use these settings. It would use encapsulation.1q allowed VLAN all. Okay, so if I configured switch port mode trunk, it would use these two settings. But I didn't. I didn't configure switch port mode trunk. I only configured switch port mode access. So G01 is an access port. So B is correct. So we know that C is not correct. It can't be an access port and a trunk port. So which of the remaining is true, A or D? Will G01 send and receive VTP advertisements or not? And the answer is D. G01 won't send and receive advertisements, VTP advertisements. And the reason for that is it is an access port. And VTP advertisements are only sent and received over trunk ports. Okay, so the answers are B and D. And that is the end of the quiz. So that is the end of today's lesson. It's really unfortunate that I couldn't show you this stuff live in the CLI. I think that would really help you understand it, but you should have a lab yourself. For the CCNP level, you really should be considering a Cisco CML. Let's Google that here. Cisco CML. Here it is, Cisco Modeling Labs. This is Cisco's emulation software, and it lets you run real Cisco iOS. So I recommend the personal version, single user. It lets you use up to 20 nodes, so that's like 20 routers or 20 switches, and that's more than enough for the Encore, I think. Now, if you want to make larger networks, you could get Personal Plus, which lets you use 40 nodes, but it's also more expensive. So Cisco Modeling Labs Personal is $200, and that is for a 365-day, so 1 year subscription. So unfortunately, like Packet Tracer, you can't access it for free. You do have to make an investment. Hopefully, if you got your CCNA, you can get a job in IT, maybe start getting a decent income, and you can afford this. If you can't, you can look for free options. Cisco DevNet does have free options, but try not to use that, because if too many people use it, Cisco will probably end it or make it more exclusive, because it has limited resources. All right, is it web-based? Yeah, well, you run the VM and then you access it through a web browser. Or what is different between CML and GNS3? Well, they're the same kind of thing. They're both an emulator. They let you run or virtualize network devices on your PC or on a server. But CML is official, and currently it's the only actually legal way to run these Cisco iOS images, because Cisco has in their end user license agreement that you won't run them outside of CML. So you can still use GNS3, but keep in mind that you're technically not supposed to. So, I don't want to recommend anything that Cisco doesn't approve of. So I recommend using CML, not using GNS3. CML uses, it's iOS V, and also things like CSR, Cloud Services Router, and they have all sorts of different nodes that you can run in CML. I really wish this worked. Yeah, I think I broke the VM. I might have to restore it or fix it somehow. All right, so that was VTP. So that is today's lesson. I will provide the slides in the description. So there is a link to a Google Drive. Currently, the slides aren't in there, but I will put them there after the stream. I do have some flashcards there, and those flashcards are actually not based off of my slides. I made some flashcards based off of this VLAN configuration guide from Cisco. So once again, I highly recommend looking at this configuration guide, studying it, and you can use my flashcards to review the information in this configuration guide. All right, now before wrapping up the stream, I want to thank my channel members. I haven't thanked you guys in a while. Because I haven't been uploading videos. So first of all, I want to thank all of my members. If you want to become a channel member, you can click the join button under the video. And there are two options. There's JCNA, which is Jeremy Certified Network Associate, which is like $2 a month. And there's JCNP, Jeremy Certified Network Professional. Keep in mind, these aren't real networking certifications. Those are just silly names, but it's just a way to support the channel. And I really appreciate it. You don't get much. You get this little cloud icon next to your name in the chat. Yeah, so if you want to support the channel, support me, feel free to become a member. I really appreciate it. Now, I want to shout out, as I do at the end of my CCNA course videos, my JCNP level channel members. So let's go through these very generous people. Thank you to Gabriel, Mr. Erlison, Marco, Chotto Mate Otaku, that is Japanese there. Gerald, thank you. Brandon, Landshark, Michael, Afshin, Jaro, Mark, is that Bold, 1C, 1U. Thank you, Nehemia, Amiens, Gina, Valerie, Vitaus, Mason, Mir, Dragos, Gerard, Tom. I believe that was Pavel. I can't actually read these characters. I think that's Pavel. Abraham, Suki, Kenneth, Seamus, Marcel, Gustavo, Nasir, John, Funny Dart, Velvet Jacob, Boson Software. Double shout out to them for sponsoring the channel. Devin and Vance. So thanks to all my channel members. I appreciate the support. And thanks to everyone for joining live. So this stream is finished. We'll do another stream next week. I have another one scheduled. Not a CCNP stream, but we'll do a different kind of stream. And then we'll do another CCNP study stream, maybe the week after that. And I'll make sure that my CML is fixed and we can actually do some stuff in the lab. So thanks everyone for joining. I'll spend some time, hang out in the chat, and then we'll wrap up this stream. I didn't actually check a lot of questions during the live stream. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Oh, we got a new member. Thank you, Renan, JCNP, new JCNP level member. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Really appreciate the support. And now you got a nice little green cloud icon next to your name. Can you run other images like Linux, Ubuntu on CML? Yes, you can. Oh, what are the hardware specs of your system? So I've got, honestly, I'm not sure. I got 16 gigs RAM. How many cores do I have? Let's see. Oops, probably shouldn't show this stuff. Yeah, 4 cores, 8 logical processors, 16 gigs RAM. It's a decent system, but not that powerful. I really should get a separate server for CML. And maybe I'll look into getting something secondhand. Because, yeah, the load of streaming and running CML at the same time is quite a lot for my current PC. So I really should get something better, especially if I want to do some larger networks. You know, running a lot of switches, a lot of routers on CML does take a lot of resources. So that's something to keep in mind too. Packet Tracer is quite lightweight. You can run it on a pretty old PC. But CML, you do need, you need the CPUs and you need RAM. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here. This has been an hour and 15 minutes. Pretty good length. All right, so thanks again for joining live. If you didn't join live, well, thanks for watching. I will add, as I said before, I will add the slides to the Google Drive in the description. And additionally, I will add some timestamps so you can hop around in this video if you're watching after and make it a little easier to watch. So thanks again for watching. See you guys soon. Thank you.